Good morning. This is Professor David Weiss, once again, speaking from our seminal program, Connecting Bridges and Borders at New Jersey City University, and our continuation in many different topics from around the world, bringing it local, and in doing so, providing an opportunity to bring it back out into the global space and arena as well. Today, we're going to talk about innovation and entrepreneurship. It's something very important also within the IDR. We have a division of the Institute for Dispute Resolution's Innovation, Entrepreneurship, Investment, which we call Entrepreneurship, Innovation, NJCU Jersey City Connect project. Within that project, we have a huge ecosystem. We'll talk a little bit more about that ecosystem in a moment through our guest speaker today. And the facets of this ecosystem are very important because it's how you build from ideas all the way through to actual execution. With us today is a gentleman that has a depth of knowledge and experience on many levels of these ecosystems, and recently just launched a new platform for content-driven prospects for the education community at multiple levels, whether it's for students, academic, or the professional community. And within that spatial design, I'm going to introduce Jack Killion, who's going to tell you a little bit about his company and this new startup venture, but also in general about ecosystem building for entrepreneurship and innovation sectors of business and through idea creation. Jack, how are you today?
I'm fine, David, and thank you for that nice introduction. Happy to be here.
So Jack, tell us first a little bit about you, and then we'll get into your most recent project that you're involved in.
It's great, David. I've been on my own as an entrepreneur for over 45 years. It was 45 years ago I quit my last paycheck job with McKinsey and Company, where I was doing strategic consulting with C-level leaders and Fortune 100 type companies. And I went off on my own. And over the past 45 years, I started and successfully grew 9 different companies. And I'm now in my 10th startup, which is Street Smart Entrepreneurs. And I started that company for a couple of reasons. One, to take advantage of my knowledge in that space, take advantage of my passion for working with entrepreneurs, but also because I think COVID-19 is going to drive entrepreneurship globally. And I'd like to be part of that movement and make that happen. So I've started companies in magazine publishing, thoroughbred racehorse breeding and training, hedge fund investing, industrial equipment manufacturing, real estate development, and professional coaching and training, which I did for the last 4 or 5 years before starting Street Smart Entrepreneurs. So I've been there and I've done that, which is the title of my second book that I'm trying to finish.
Well, it's amazing to hear, I think, for our audience, which is a very global audience around the world, a lot of the experiences that you have built over the years, I think what comes to mind are really building blocks, right? And coming out of McKinsey certainly gave you that traditional belts and suspenders skill set of strategic planning, looking at different models, and then you were able to do and convert that ultimately from the different things you did after that into a lot of what we refer to as creativity with a serial entrepreneurial perspective. My question to you would be, of the number of companies that you touched on through your life, what was one of the greatest experiences that has always resonated through all of these different transitions and opportunities that you yourself were part of or created post McKinsey?
Well, David, I seldom do anything that I'm not really interested in or passionate about. So in some respect, every startup that I've launched and developed, I've been excited about and take real pride in. But maybe the one that stands out most is when my dad passed away. He was head of a small, messed up manufacturing company in real financial trouble. When he dropped dead, he had $23 in the bank and owed over $2 million, most of it personally guaranteed. He passed away on a Saturday, and I had not been involved in the company and had not really been involved with him for over 10 years. So when I walked into that situation Saturday afternoon and saw the shape that the company was in, and there was no succession plan, no successor to continue running the company, if I had let the thing go into bankruptcy, the creditors would have gone after my mother's car, her house, whatever assets she had. So I had no choice but to try to make it better. And at the time, I was running two magazines, and I was pretty busy doing that. One was Harper's, one of the older magazines in America, and the other one was a startup magazine called Country Music. So I was running two magazines, and then I had to jump into the manufacturing company, and I had about 1 week's worth of payroll personally that I could use. So just saving that company and turning it around, I ran it for 13 years and eventually built it into a pretty successful global company and wound up selling it to a public British company and going on their board for 3 years and doing 10 high tech acquisitions in the 3 years. And I was running three of the companies that the British company acquired. So, of all the things I've done, that sort of is one that stands out in terms of being a major accomplishment in a very tough situation. But everything else I've done has been interesting and has involved a high degree of innovation and a high degree of networking, which I think is key to building any global ecosystem. You really have to know how to meet people, create alliances, add value to people. And if you're trying to do something on a global basis, you have to be skillful at networking and building relationships globally, not just in your local or your sector community.
Yeah, it's interesting as I hear you speak, and I'm hoping the audience also perhaps takes this in. I mean, there are a number of different things you said through that personal experience that you just shared with us that I think could go on for an entire year of discussions, especially within the classroom as well as in the boardrooms. But the one symbolism that I think I hear from you is that when we talk about the passion, we also talk about the person and how it's personal in terms of how you feel about that passion. Would you agree with me?
Oh, totally, totally. There
And
are
is that,
there are
go
certain
ahead.
personal characteristics that I think are vital for any innovator or any entrepreneur. And having passion for what you're doing is certainly one of them.
And do you believe that when we, because passion obviously is a word that can be interpreted in different ways, but if we're speaking directly to innovation and entrepreneurship, especially the innovator, which is creating the new, value to some situation or system or product, how does one think about finding and tapping into their passion in order to be successful ultimately at execution or even creating the vision for the execution?
Well, I think one of the key requirements for tapping into your passion is to have a real sense of curiosity and being in a constant learning mode. I find one of the weaknesses that too many entrepreneurs have is that they haven't really taught themselves to spot opportunities. And unless you're spotting opportunities, it's unlikely you're going to trigger your innovation capabilities. So, I've sort of have been lucky that over the years I've gotten to be pretty good at spotting opportunities, and they can come from anywhere. They can come from driving down the highway and seeing a billboard that triggers a thought, or reading something in a paper or magazine, or hearing something on TV or the radio, or overhearing a conversation in the bar. And it could be just one or two words that trigger something in you that turns on, your capacity to think outside the box and do things differently, which is one thing I think all successful entrepreneurs have to do. They have to be constantly reinventing themselves and their business model. It can't be stagnant.
I think it's an excellent point. I like to refer to that as being, very adaptable within your vision, and then how you find along the trajectory line of vision to sparking additional creativity, which must potentially be adaptable as well to the environment. What do you find as the opposite to that question, though? You know, when you have great minds sort of independently thinking and having the spirit of really what will continue to resonate, this word of passion, should you recognize that there's a point in that trajectory that you need to pull back? Because obviously people who have visions and they're doing a bunch of different multitasking, opportunistic things, there's a point in the trajectory where they need to pull back a little bit in order to get one of those visions at least executed, right? So yeah, as I've been told, having great vision is one thing, being a visionary and executing is another. So what advice would you give for our audience in terms of just, at least to your point, recognizing when you think you should now, of the 20 things you may be involved in, or even within the business itself, singularly, where they started off with a business plan and maybe now they have to adapt. What is one of we'll use the flashing lights of like a traffic light, you know, when you go from green to yellow to red. So when do you need to decide that the green is changing to yellow and you need to sort of get a little bit more precision based before it goes to red?
Well, I think one key thing for innovators and entrepreneurs is to always understand the numbers in your business. And I find that many entrepreneurs, don't pay adequate attention to the numbers. And the numbers will generally dictate when you have to really hit a specific focus point and concentrate on doing something, either to solve a problem or to take advantage of an opportunity. And, I'm a very big believer that all entrepreneurial efforts need to have multiple revenue streams, which means keeping multiple balls in the air. And which one you focus on at any given time sort of depends on what the numbers are telling you. Where's the opportunity the greatest, or where's the challenge the greatest? Like when I took over my dad's company, like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, the numbers were how much money in the bank and how much did the company owe, and what did I need to focus on in order to solve that problem. Everything else became redundant. So I need to keep the creditors away, and I need to generate enough cash to make week two's payroll. So I very quickly eliminated anything else about new product development, or do we have the right team in place, or was this a viable long-term strategy? So just understanding the numbers themselves can really focus what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think you bring up two really excellent points, and it answers that traffic light question. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, the first one is the numbers sort of reflective in knowing when you need to, I only use the word pull back, but adapt to the transaction at hand, right?
Right.
And the second part, though, is that once you have completed that task, you're still keeping the other balls in the air, but you've tempered them and then you re-engage again.
Right. Right.
My question would be then, when you re-engage again, or you're beginning that part of creating many balls in the air, what's your philosophy on being sure that they have some synergistic value amongst themselves, even though they may be entirely independent balls in many different forms and shapes? But what do you do to be sure that there's synergistic values amongst the balls while they're all in the air, in order to eventually capture the maximum efficiency, but ultimately the leverage you could have in the ability to have harmonization of different flows and streams of income, or in terms of capital opportunity and development and personal achievement? How would you sort of recognize that?
Well, sometimes that's really difficult to do if these different tasks are so distinctly different, and particularly if they involve different communities of people. Like when I was running a manufacturing company and two magazines, those were pretty independent types of communities. But one of the ways I found to look for and hopefully develop synergies in situations like that where you're multitasking is to do a good job of keeping everybody up to date on what you're doing. So there's real transparency. There's no secrets. There's no real, people don't perceive there's a conflict of interest in the part of the entrepreneur that he's being equally responsible for the different tasks that he or she is involved in. So I think transparency, open communications, and to the extent that it's possible, involving the other group of people in some of the challenges over here on this side of the ledger. So for example, when I had to take over the manufacturing company, I was very open with the owners of Harper's Magazine, who were also the funding source for us starting Country Music Magazine. I was very open with them about the new situation I found myself in and how I was going to have to divide myself up. But I tried to assure them in no way would that have an impact on how I carried out my responsibilities with heading the two magazines. So I think being totally open and transparent and sharing as much information as possible is a good thing. And when I had the manufacturing company, eventually we morphed into having multiple locations, one in California, one in Florida, and one in New Jersey. And to sort of deal with the issue that you're raising, I made a point of having people move among the different locations. So we tried to minimize the us versus them kind of conflict that always usually results in an organization with multiple locations.
So Jack, when we talk about these sort of multiple locations, I think, it's interesting because it reminds me of, thinking about it from a matrix model versus, a vertical model, right? Within a corporate structure, how do you break down the silos? It's a good segue, I think, for us to talk about from an academic medium. You raised in the beginning of the discussion the ideas around what you see coming through the COVID opportunities. I like to call them COVID opportunities because certainly we recognize the challenges that COVID brings, but I think that the opportunities in innovation and entrepreneurship at many different levels exist. Here at the IDR and through our Connecting Bridges and Borders project, we like to look at it as an opportunity to improve or expand or even develop new highways of innovation, and the highways representing ecosystems along the way. Within the prism of your new startup, tell us a little about where you sit on that highway and within the ecosystem, and how your startup is going to provide value to that new process in the COVID opportunities of connectivity, ideas, global discussions, and really building new development, if you will, and innovation for the next generation to come, and really for humanity as a whole.
Well, I see, despite all the terrible things that COVID is doing, I see COVID having a real positive impact in several significant areas. I think it's certainly going to change the way our education system works worldwide. We're not going to be able to go back to the old way of doing things. It's certainly going to change our healthcare system. So, I think America is going to become less dependent on overseas developers and product suppliers. And I think we're going to find ways to accelerate the development of new medical solutions. So I think the medical industry is going to be impacted. I think, as I mentioned, entrepreneurship globally, because millions of people have been downsized and lost their jobs or had their career path changed, and they're never going to be willing or able to go back to where they were. So they're going to have to tap into their innovative abilities and recreate themselves either as a full-time or part-time entrepreneur. So entrepreneurship, I think, is going to grow significantly. I think corporate America is going to become more competitive because it's going to become leaner and more nimble. We're not going to go back, I don't think, to having these massive headquarter buildings with expensive real estate costs. After the COVID-19 is over, I think many people are going to continue to work remotely. So we're going to cut the overhead of corporate America, which is going to make us more nimble, more competitive globally. So I can see business coming back into America because we'll be more competitive, particularly in the manufacturing sector. So I just see a lot of positive changes. But for street smart entrepreneurs to play a role in that situation, our mission is going to be to help educate entrepreneurs globally by developing online and in-person courses and events. Maybe we'll even create an incubator at some point. Maybe we'll create an investment fund at some point. But right now we're focusing on developing content that can improve entrepreneurs' performance. And in our market is a global market. So we're doing things that hopefully will begin to build bridges globally. So for some of the early programs that we've had, I've reached out to contacts I've had in various countries like India and Pakistan and China and Japan and India, and begin to spread the word about what Street Smart Entrepreneurs is doing. And in our early events, we've had maybe a third of the total participants come from outside the US. So we're beginning to build a global infrastructure, and that has to take place at all levels, has to take place with universities. So David, I think you know that last week we had a conversation with a business school in Turkey, and we've had similar discussions with business schools in other countries, one in Pakistan, for example. I have a close relationship with the Dean of Student Affairs. So we need to develop our ecosystem to include US and global education organizations, nonprofits. For example, we're working to develop a relationship with a Kauffman Foundation out in Kansas City that is very focused on growing entrepreneurship in this country particularly. We want to work with various organizations that have members that are compatible with the audience we're trying to reach. So I just recently agreed to go on the board of an organization in New Jersey that focuses on serving small and mid-sized organizations. So it's a constant process of trying to grow our network in very diverse sectors, all of which touch on the entrepreneurial business model.
Well, I think that's a great way to sort of leave our audience with some really exciting narratives of what you are doing in your company. I am proud to also say that your organization is engaged with the IDR through its ecosystem, and I know you have had the chance to speak to our students, and there's ongoing opportunity growth, I think, for us to continue to share within our innovation entrepreneurship ecosystem within our institute. Thank you for taking your time to speak to us today about a little bit about your life and what you do and your dedication to idea creation, innovation and entrepreneurship. It is the heartbeat, as you said, to what American ingenuity has always been, and what I hope will continue into the future with new exciting prospects, both for this country, but also for humanity as a whole. And that is something that's very important and near and dear to all of us that really dedicate our lives to this process. Jack, thank you for being part of our show today.
No, David, thank you very much. It's been a privilege. Then just, I encourage you to keep up the important work that you're doing, because you're having an impact on people's lives and their careers. And there's nothing more important than that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Once again, this is Professor David Weiss speaking on behalf of the Institute for Dispute Resolution at New Jersey City University. And of course, our seminal program here that you can catch every week from all over the world on different mediums and different topics of interest to our audience members that we understand is reaching more than 25,000 people around the world and growing every day. We encourage you to check out the IDR website and our different multiple divisions in our ecosystem, and engage with us, engage with our students, our professionals, our academic interest, all in an effort to build a better future for all of us together. Until next time, as always, I bid adieu.